The Six Nations, a battle of attrition, passion and fierce, ancient rivalries. The biggest and best annual rugby competition in the world. But how did we get here? The championship first started in 1883 as the Home Nations Championship that was played between Scotland, England, Ireland and Wales. The tournament was then later turned into the Five Nations Championship in 1910 when France joined, and then became the Six Nations in 2000s with the invitation of Italy. The Home Nations Championship started in 1883 involving Scotland, England, Wales and Ireland. The first tournament took place over 3 months, starting on the 16th of December with Wales playing England and finishing on the 3rd of March with Scotland playing England. England won the first tournament with 6 points by beating Wales 2-0, Ireland 1-0 and having a scoreless game against Scotland, meaning it went down to tries scored with England having 2 and Scotland having 1. Scotland finished second with 4 points with a 3-1 win over Wales, a 1-0 win over Ireland and the loss to England previously mentioned. Wales and Ireland both finished on 0 points and didn't play each other in the championship. Scoring at this point was based on goals scored. These came from try conversions, drop goals and goals from mark, which was a way you used to be able to score from choosing a place kick when the mark was called. The England player Charles Wade is credited with the first try in championship history. As a result of a disagreement between England and Scotland over a try England had scored but was disallowed by the referee citing a foul by Scotland, the International Rugby Football Board was founded. England argued that the referee should have played the advantage and said as they made the rules, if they said the try stood, then the try stood. Scotland, Ireland and Wales formed the IRFB in response to this. However, England refused to join and also refused to accept that the IRFB should be recognised lawmakers of the game. In 1887, the IRFB agreed not to play England until they joined, leading to their exclusion from the 1888 and 89 championships. England finally agreed to join in 1890. The IRFB was later renamed to the IRB and is now known as World Rugby. In the Home Nations Championship, finishing in 1909, England had 3 outright wins and 2 shared wins. Ireland had 1 outright win and 2 shared wins. Scotland had 8 outright wins and 3 shared wins, and Wales had 6 outright wins and 2 shared wins. The first Five Nations Championship took place in 1910 with the addition of France. By this point, the scoring system in rugby had changed. A try was worth 3 points, while a conversion from the try gave an additional 2 points. A drop goal was worth 4 points, while a goal from mark and penalty goal were worth 3 points. France finished bottom of the first Five Nations with 0 points. Wales scored 49 points against France in the opening game of the championship. England won the 1910 championship with 7 points after 3 wins and a draw to Ireland. In 1931, France were thrown out of the Five Nations amid rumours of professionalism in the domestic game. At this time, rugby was strictly an amateur sport and professionalism was not tolerated by the other unions. France remained expelled through and including the 1939 championship. They were re-entered later in 1939, but the championship was put on hold until 1947 due to the outbreak of World War II in Europe. In this era where France were not in the tournament, the competition went back to being named the Home Nations Championship. England had 2 outright wins and 2 shared wins. Ireland had 1 outright win and 2 shared wins. Scotland had 2 outright wins and Wales had 1 outright win and 2 shared wins. The last Home Nations Championship ended in a draw between England, Ireland and Wales, all finishing on 4 points in 1939. France won their first shared title in 1954 and their first outright title in 1959. 44 and 49 years after joining the championship respectively. So don't worry Italy, there's still hope. By the 1970s, the Five Nations had become the most important rugby series in the Northern Hemisphere, with matches becoming all-ticket affairs and gaining huge popularity through television. But in 1972, the tournament was not finished as Wales and Scotland refused to travel to Ireland for the games due to the escalating political situation. In 1973, a strange occurrence happened, with all teams having won 2 games and lost 2 games, leaving the competition in a 5-way tie, meaning everyone was champions that season. There was no actual award for winning the Five Nations until 1993, when the Five Nations Trophy was introduced. The year after marked the end of shared titles, as they took into account points difference for teams who were tied. Throughout the Five Nations, England had 17 outright wins and 6 shared wins. Ireland had 6 outright wins and 5 shared wins. Scotland had 5 outright wins and 6 shared wins, and Wales had 15 outright wins and 8 shared wins. And France had 12 outright wins and 8 shared wins. The first Six Nations took place in 2000, with the addition of Italy, to the other 5 nations in the competition. The opening game of the Six Nations saw defending champions Scotland play newcomers Italy in Rome, which ended in a surprising 34-20 win to the Azzurri. England won the first Six Nations Championship with 8 points. France came second with 6, which was the same number of points as third place Ireland and fourth place Wales. Italy came last with 2 points as Scotland finished 5th on the same amount of points. Scotland ended England's chance of a Grand Slam by beating them 19-13 at Murrayfield on the last day, giving Scotland the Calcutta Cup. In 2002, France won their first title since the game went professional in 1996, winning the Grand Slam. 2005 saw Wales become the first team to win a Grand Slam by playing more games away from home, a feat that Ireland repeated 4 years later, which was Ireland's first championship win since 1985. In 2013, Italy would take 2 huge scalps by beating France and Ireland. France shockingly finished bottom of the championship for the first time since 1999, only 3 years after a Grand Slam win. In 2017, the Six Nations announced that they would introduce a bonus point rule to the tournament, changing the competition's long scoring format of 2 points for a win and 1 for a draw to 4 points for a win, 2 for a draw, and an extra point being rewarded to a team who scores 4 tries or more, and a losing bonus point being awarded to a team within 7 points of the winning team. If you win all of your games to protect the integrity of the Grand Slam, you'll be given 3 extra points at the end. As with the bonus point rule, a team could theoretically win every game and still be behind a team who has lost 1 game. In 2019, rugby history was made with a 38-38 draw between Scotland and England at Twickenham. England were leading 31-0 over Scotland in the first half, but the Scots managed to fight back to be 38-31 up in overtime. England managed to score a late try to even the game, making it the highest scoring draw in international rugby history. Scotland also retained the Calcutta Cup for the first time since 1984, as they won it in 2018, and the previous holders keep the cup in the event of a draw. Scotland and England have played for the Calcutta Cup since 1879. Throughout the Six Nations, England have won 7 titles, Wales have won 6, France have won 5, and Ireland have won 4. Both Scotland and Italy have not won the Six Nations title at the time of this video being made, but fingers crossed.